share more listicle, publish more listicle about your brand a lot on the web, and try to build them as deep and as best as you can to get some listicle that will be ranking on Google. And if you're on something which is super high competition, try to go for longer type of queries, which will be based on the fan out of GPT. I am Leo Poitevin, and this is SEO in 2026 Additional Insights.
Leo, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
Hey David, my number one SEO tip in 2026 is a bit more GEO, and AI visibility than SEO. And something that we realized recently is that ChatGPT love listicles. So what we are doing right now with the link building budget that we have from clients is that we are pushing as much as possible listicles that will rank on Google and that will be taken after by ChatGPT to be increase the visibility of our clients overall. Why we do that and how we do that? First of all, we build the listicle. And to build a good listicle, you need generally an OL list, like order list, HTML list at the beginning of your article, a table, and some detailed component after that. And the second question that we have is how to find a good place to put your listicle. And what we will be doing generally is that we will extract all the backlinks that are interesting. We'll search the one with the highest number of top 3 keywords ranking with, if possible, the lowest price, and then we will try to push that. Generally, we go for mid-media that are around like 300 euros. So like that, we have a good quality-price ratio and a high chance of rankings to rank the listicle. Then the listicle is taken again by ChatGPT, and you have a good link building budget, which is invested as well to yield some performances in ChatGPT and GEO.
Whoa, okay. Well, I wonder if we can turn this podcast episode into a listicle. So, X steps to producing the optimum listicle you could ever dream of. Maybe we'll turn it into that. We'll see. So in terms of defining what an optimum listicle looks like nowadays compared with maybe what it looked like a few years ago, has it changed at all? I mean, obviously, we're all familiar with 10 top of this or 5 simple steps to doing this. Is there a particular format that works best in 2026?
Yeah, so definitely there is format. The format like improve years after years, and I've been doing affiliate marketing for a while, So the top 10 XYZ was my business for a while, and so I improved my way of doing listicle with that. What happened now, which is really important in my opinion, is that the first part is generally 2 possibilities, but all a table, a comparing table with like, 3 or 4, 5 columns with different stuff that the people will use to compare the different solution, and ordered list. So typically, generally I go for top 10 because ChatGPT loves the top 10 or top 5 or top 7 or whatever. And the order list, generally you use order because you want ChatGPT to feel that there is an order in this list exactly. And this is top 10, not a list of 10 good solutions, but like really one is better than the others. And after that, what happens is that you have the detailed comparison. So this top stuff, generally it takes like 200, 300 words, and you're on an article that will generally be like 3,000 words. So the question is like, what is the following words? And the following words is like, you go for detailed comparison of this top 10, and after you do one H3, for example, for each solution, and under this H3 you detail why this solution is the best, then another H3 for a second solution, you detail why this one is the best. You had screenshot of every solution at every steps, and like that you can fill a big article generally, which is like really details with the pros and cons of each solution, why they're the best, why they're good, why they're better than the others, and like that you have a really, really solid listicle. The last part that you will add on this listicle generally is how we made this listicle, how we compare the website, how we decide to put one in front of the others. So this is something which is quite important. And after you can have a bit of like semantic that you add at the end of that. That can be conclusion, that can be like, what if the price of XYZ, that can be like more details that is needed sometimes to rank on Google, and that will be asked by, semantic classic tools and everything.
Lovely. There are lots of different elements there that I'd like to go back to in greater depth. You talked a bit about tables, about and the importance of ordering lists as well. But just in terms of word count, is there any length of listicle that is optimum?
So I think personally that the longer is the better. It sounds a little bit like an old school answer, but the reality is that the longer is the better if the content is properly written. And you can see that because in highly competitive niches, generally content are really long and they're really well written as well. So people generally will be like, yeah, you don't have to do something like 3K words and better to be like well intent and have a clean word count and have a better content and everything. But if you can do a really long and well written content, you have the best of all, I think. So generally, I think go as long as possible, as soon as you are not losing quality over quantity. And the most important will be to have a high rate of quality. I think overall, the minimum word count will be around 1,500. That will be generally like the minimum I go for. And generally, I don't go above like 4,000 or 5,000. 4,000 is really quite a long article. So generally, I don't go above 4,000 because I'm not in niches that need that. But if you are in super highly competitive niches, for example, I work in gambling for a while, and having 10,000 words articles is quite normal in this type of niche.
Lovely. I love the specific answers like this as well. Do you use AI to help you produce the content?
Yeah, I do because copywriters cost a lot of money on one side, and it saves me a lot of time as well. Because like when you have somebody else to do the article, and then you wait that they come back, etc., you have a lot like latency in the produce. And when you're trying to impact ChatGPT, you have to be fast generally because it's already a lot of search and development and everything. I use AI, I use Claude, I use the last model like Opus 4.7 now. And what I do as well is that I feed it with some semantic tools. So I use French ones because I'm French, which is like Semantics or Utex Guru or Tot SEO. But some English ones like Surfer are doing really well as well and are doing a good job. So just having some good semantics, what are the intent, what are the subheadings that you're supposed to insert, and adding all of this semantic and headings generally after the big comparison, detailed comparison that you will do in the middle of the article. And generally that's how I produce my content.
Why do you use Claude?
I prefer Claude over ChatGPT. I feel that is falling less into like shortcut of producing content. So ChatGPT will do a lot of bullet lists generally, and if you try to produce something super long, you don't want so much bullet list. And you can see that Claude naturally will go less into bullet list mode. And I feel that the content that is written by Claude is overall a bit better. I prefer type of Claude content and everything. But to be honest, during a while I was on GPT, after I switched to Claude, after I went back to GPT. So I changed a lot. I know some people that use Gemini as well. So I think these three ones are the best ones to producing content. Personally, my favorite is Claude, but these trends will work well generally.
Sounds good. And going back to your comment about tables, why do you incorporate tables in the listicle? And do you want AI to reproduce that table within the result?
Yeah, so the table in Listicles, first of all, is because I want a lot of different formats in my content in general. So that's why I use like list, table, and paragraph as soon as possible, and I like vary them, So if Google wants one type of format, I provide it. On the second hand, definitely GPT or AI in general, they like to have different type of content as well, different format of content as well. So if you have like on one side one table and after a list and after something else, and one of the format is like, how to say that, speaking to them a bit more, and they are like getting it a bit more, and they like this format a bit more, they will use it and they will reproduce it sometime in the answers. Right now, it used to be the case, like really a lot, like, I don't know, 1 year ago. Right now, it's a bit less the case. I think they're more like matching different sources, mixing them, and having the, overall list that they will have built themselves, and they will not take your stuff for granted. But sometimes it's still the case. If you're one of the only sources that they can have and they feel is the most reliable, they will take it and they will use it like that.
And you also talked about using an ordered list as well. And I've seen quite a few posts start off from the high number and work down to number 1. So you're starting off at number 10, then discovering number 1, perhaps even after going onto a new page. Is there any benefit to doing it either way?
For me, there is really a big benefits to starting from the best one. So first thing is that if you use a classic HTML order list, from the basic of like last century type of HTML, The first one that you will put will be marked as first. So HTML basic stuff is like the first is the first, and the first is not the number 10, and you do a reverse engineering kind of stuff. But sometimes people will use the number 10 to have like a kind of better retention, because people will scroll it and will want to discover the last one and be like, okay, what is the best tips and everything. Personally, I think that people don't have time anymore to just like stay on your page forever to try to discover the last tip, and the best is overall to give them as much information as the beginning, and more information you will give them, more they will trust it, and more they will trust you, more they will stay on your article. So I'm more about like giving as much as possible at the beginning, and giving a quick answer at the beginning, and after being like, oh, you want more detail, I will provide more detail later on. So like that, the people that are interested, they will scroll and they will dig into the article, and they will not like just skim everything to go to directly the golden nugget at the end of the article.
Lovely. Now, you also say that GPT uses Google to find solutions via fan out. What do you mean by that?
Typically, when you do a query to GPT, there is two different possibilities. First possibilities is that the GPT knows the answers. For example, like how long it takes to cook an egg. It will tell you like, okay, it takes 1 minute to cook an egg and whatever, and it will not do any Google search to know what is happening and how long it takes, because it's sure on the answer and it doesn't need to take precaution or anything. The second possibility is, for example, if you ask what is the best podcast for SEO in 2026, because he's not sure of the answer, he doesn't want to take risk, about providing a fake info. So what he will do is that he will search in Google, because Google is like kind of the truth and kind of a good source for information. Indexing everything for himself will be super hard, and crawling the web will be super hard. So what it do generally is that it will type different queries. One query will be, for example, best SEO podcast 2026. It will type another one just to cross different sources. So perhaps he will type best marketing, digital SEO, reviews, podcasts, YouTube, 2026. And he type a lot of different queries on Google that are like super, super long tail generally, which are like all the fan out. So that's the queries, the main queries, which is split into different sub-queries, and all the sub-queries end up different queries that he has to Google. He mix every sources that he get at the end, and according to all of that, he end up by giving you the answers. The interesting thing is that if the main stuff that you're trying to manipulate is super hard, so for example, best SEO agency in the world will be quite a hard queries to manipulate in ChatGPT. It's quite hard to go frontal on that, to go directly on these queries, to try to rank on keywords like that and to try to manipulate on keywords like that. So generally what you will do is that you will check the fan out, you will check the sub-queries that ChatGPT asks on Google, and you will try to influence these ones specifically instead of going directly to the main query. It's a bit like going from long tail to short tail in SEO. It's going from like fan out queries to direct main queries on GPT.
So what's the best way to conduct keyword research nowadays if you've got this extensive fan-out process with massively long tail keyword phrases? Do traditional keyword research tools still work, or are there other places you go to for this?
Yeah, the crazy stuff is that, first of all, the volume overall on GPT is way lower than the one on Google. So already keyword research is a bit like truncated by the fact that you have less keywords overall and way more context generally. So a lot of people will give super long doing vocal, doing audio to GPT to have like a lot of different details on the stories and everything. Secondly, what I do generally is that I take the best keyword that I have in SEO and I try to translate them into first-person type of query to GPT. So, for example, if best SEO agency is your keyword, what I do is that I will type something, or I will translate it into something like I searched the best SEO agency. So, like that, I keep the initial intent and I just try to translate it in a more like normal way, NLP normal way of speaking and writing. And then what happens is that if you have some good tools, so personally I use a Belgium tool which is called Mention Lab and that, but typically Peak and Profound and all this AI monitoring tool, they will give you the fan out of your queries. So you just enter your queries in your tools, the like GEO AI visibility type of tool, and they will give you the fan out that you will need to influence. But really quick, you will end up with like a lot of different stuff that will have like super low volume. So it just end up with like a lot of different sources, a lot of different queries, and the volume are way lower than in SEO. So the way to optimize for all of that is a bit weird sometimes. And sometimes I just go for like, for example, massive strategy of sending a lot of different pages or a lot of different media presence, super cheap ones, because I know that's like super long tail. Then you can rank on a lot of different stuff. But yeah, end up a bit spammy sometimes when you try to go for all the fan out. So what I try to do is like to check if there is some tendencies in the fan out. And if I see one tendency, for example, everything including reviews, I will try to optimize for reviews type of queries.
Okay. And where does topic and competition come into this as well? And how important it is potential keyword volume versus competition and relevance, I guess, to your target audience?
So there is some topics where the volume will be super high on ChatGPT and some topics where the volume will be super low on ChatGPT. It really depends on your persona and the ICP that you're targeting. So for example, here we SEO, doing marketing for other SEO and tech people and B2B and type of stuff like that. It's type of people that use a lot ChatGPT. So obviously we are in a sphere that we need a lot of optimization because a lot of the research will be done on GPT. For example, I also help some people that are selling CBD in France for like, I don't know, people that doesn't search on GPT so much. So for example, if you're a CBD e-commerce, the volume that you will get on ChatGPT will be quite low. I have as well, for example, an content in Dubai. For him, it's super high because content is B2B. Dubai is like a lot of people that are more like tech friendly, young and everything. So the volume tend to be quite high. So really depends on the ICP that you're targeting and everything. And according to that, sometimes the volume and the topic is really GPT friendly, and sometimes it's not really, and it's not yet a trend that you have to open.
And how do you monitor success?
Oh man, it's one of the hardest parts. So first of all, I think if you want to do that, you have to be able to do that and to jump on it without wanting a big, impact directly measurable and everything, because it's quite hard to measure success. But then you have tools to measure success. So typically Ahrefs have brand visibility on AI and a lot of like Peak and Profound, for example, that I cited earlier, where I have some stuff like that can check how much you're cited when you ask the same queries to ChatGPT again and again and again. So generally what you would do is that you will rely on this tool to know how much you're cited on a certain query, on a certain topic. Then on a pure business perspective, there is two stuff that you can measure quite easily. The traffic that you're getting from AI on Google Analytics or your analytics tool. So for example, analytics and visits and session coming from GPT, coming from Anthropic, coming from all these AI tools. That would be a part of it. But generally these sources, they are only here when you are one of the sources, and not, if you just cited as a brand, as the best brand. Like for example, if you're searching the best tool for link building in SEO, they will cite Majestic, but they will perhaps not put a link to Majestic, So what happened in this situation is that people will search the brand, and you will normally get an increase in terms of brand search. And the conversion will be higher as well on brand search, because typically conversion from ChatGPT is super, super high generally. So it will be that. And the best way to track it generally is just to ask two people, where did you find us? And a lot of people will tell you AI, LLM, or GPT.
Leo, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
Share more listicle, publish more listicle about your brand a lot on the web, and try to build them as deep and as best as you can to get some listicle that will be ranking on Google. And if you're on something which is super high competition, try to go for longer type of queries, which will be based on the fan out of GPT.
Leo Poitevin is co-founder at Linkavista and CEO at Amstrack. Find out more over at linkavista.com. Leo, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you, David. That was nice.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at SEOin2026.com.